We're continuing our pre-election series on Agenda, so Alistair, what's today's topic?
Well, it is arguably the most important fundamental one of them all, and that's the economy. That's something perhaps we've taken for granted for decades now. But I was at a Chamber of Commerce event recently for new candidates, at which they sent out a pretty stark message that we can no longer take economic growth and the associated revenue growth for granted.
And you say you were at a presentation for prospective candidates. You not got something you want to tell us, have you?
No, I was just an observer. Thank you. There were some chamber members there as well, and I believe they delivered the same message to Tynwald members at the same day. I don't think it was quite so warmly received by all members. I get the impression that there has been an element of denial within government about what's been happening to the economy.
Well, certainly, if listeners want to listen back to Perspective, the Perspective show, the first of the Perspective shows we've done about the July sitting of Tynwald, includes the Minister for Enterprise very roundly condemning the suggestion that the economy isn't doing well, and it had a bad patch, but we've got through it, and things are bouncing back. And I suppose ministers do have to talk things up. The very last thing you want is a minister who's regularly going on the radio saying, "Oh dear, things are not looking good, things are bad." But maybe there's a balance between talking things up and maybe not over egging the pudding.
Yeah, and I think if there is a problem, you need to recognise it in order to fix it. I mean, when you've got the main business organisation referring to the most serious contraction in living memory and saying our economic miracle has run out of steam. I mean, basically they're talking about the first proper recession, really, in the last few years, for 40 years. They're talking about 1,000 jobs going in e-gaming, financial services, in the last couple of years. They're talking about how most of their members have no confidence in government's economic vision. There's also been the criticism of the DFE structure. There's something seriously wrong there. And for the government side just to try and sort of say nothing to see here, move on, I don't think it's credible, and it's not helpful.
So why is it important? Well, certainly why is it the government relies at least on the economy growing?
Traditionally that's been the main policy. The main measure has been GDP, which apparently contracted 7.4% in the 2 years to March 2024. The general view is that the economy grows, profits grow, and more importantly, earnings grow. So there's more people earning, they're earning more, they pay tax. I mean, most of the tax comes from people earning, but some businesses do pay tax as well, and then you get VAT. So generally, the pool gets bigger and supposedly everyone benefits.
But there is and perhaps this is what we are discovering now, it's certainly the last 5 years where there has been this economic downturn. Now, government probably quite rightly points to the fact that the war in Ukraine has significantly impacted on Western economies. But effectively, we are now discovering what happens when circumstances, some of which are beyond our control, contrive to stop the economy growing. So if in the past we've relied on that economic growth, that we're going to get more and more new people in to pay for the things through taxation and economic development, more VAT being paid and all of that, this allows government departments to increase their expenditure and allows services to be well delivered. So things like the health service, if we had a really strong growing economy, the extra 50 million that's gone in over the last 5 years probably wouldn't have been really noticed if the economy was growing really strongly. But perhaps this shows that relying on this, relying purely on growth, is maybe a dangerous thing.
I think it's if you're relying on just pure population growth and indiscriminate population growth, that's obviously very short-sighted, especially in the age of AI. I think you can grow the economy without necessarily growing the number of bodies. And that does seem to be the standard approach. I mean, you get it in the UK. It's the way out of the dilemma between how do you improve public services without increasing tax. Even more important here, because low tax is still seen as the cornerstone of our economy. Whether there's any wriggle room in that or not, I'm not sure, but maybe there's a debate to be had about that. But I mean, I think part of the problem for the island is we've just got so used to low tax economic growth, reasonably funded public services. I mean, a lot of that was helped by the VAT agreement in the past as well, that the public and the politicians have lost sight of the fundamentals of this. And what the Chamber are trying to do is to issue a kind of wake-up call, and whether it'll get through and actually change the way that the government and the public think remains to be seen.
So in terms then of that, why do you think that maybe it won't? Because I'm guessing there were quite a few. Well, you've told us there were quite a few wannabe MHKs at the presentation. I imagine those wannabe MHKs will be keen to pick on anything that might be seen as critical of government, because they will be, in most cases, fighting in seats where there's an incumbent MHK, so they'll want to have some point of difference. So why do you think it may not hit the mark?
I don't know. I just think that the weight of the status quo, the weight of the kind of entrenched ways of doing things within government might be kind of overpowering. I'm sure the candidates will take it seriously, and I'm sure the members themselves will take it seriously. I think the Chamber would benefit if they were a bit more specific about what particular changes they would like to see early on, because saying we need people to take the economy seriously, and everyone say, of course we do, we get that. But then it can fizzle out quite easily.
And sometimes newly elected members take the view that they have to do something, so they introduce new measures and new proposals which involve more, but in many cases anyway, involve more bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And that more bureaucracy then actually does the complete opposite of what needs to happen, and perhaps a little bit less direct meddling in the economy. Maybe meddling's a bit of a harsh term, but you know what I mean. Government trying to second guess what's needed all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the problem. But
Yes.
then we move on to the model that exists in terms of economic support through the agency model in the Department for Enterprise, which is supposed to effectively give control, or some level of control at least, to the various industries, so that they can effectively use or pull the levers of power in the direction that they collectively think is going to be in the best interest of their industry. That's how that agency model is supposed to work. But there are some critics of that model.
There's quite a lot of critics of it, and it strikes me that rather like Manx Care, the DFE model was brought in as the solution and is now being seen as the problem by some people in business itself. So I do think, and the economic strategy, the flagship economic strategy of growing the population, aiming for these ambitious jobs target, there didn't seem to be any distinction between valuable jobs and less valuable jobs, or the overall net economic benefit. I think that's now under review, but the department says, well, we're not radically overhauling it, we're just tweaking it because it's still fundamentally sound. I'm not sure that people will be happy to let the department engage in that, lead that review itself. I think it probably needs a broader exercise of where we're at.
And yet that is what Tynwald voted for. The standing committee, the Economic Policy Review Committee, made a report. The criticism, which I think wasn't wholly unfair of that report, was that it had investigated in a very casual sort of way, but had already made its mind up before it received any evidence, and the evidence, which was scant in the report, didn't necessarily back up the recommendations. As a result, it was a relatively open goal for the government amendment to be kicked into, in which basically it was said, instead of the committee doing these reviews, we'll just leave it to the department to crack on, and the department will sort this out.
Yeah, and I don't think that's going to be enough for a lot of people. And one of the things that did emerge from the Chamber's event the other day was the concerns about marketing. That seemed to be the big focus, that government had no longer had a clear, joined up, focused marketing effort. It seems to have been split across so many different components that people are no longer clear about, what is it that the Isle of Man's offering, what is our image, and there's a big push on doing something about that.
Because this happened, of course, famously. I was part of the team that did it, and that was the introduction of the aspiration of freedom to flourish. Perhaps that wasn't so well communicated. It was, I think many people assumed that freedom to flourish was the finished article, whereas actually it was what we should be working to, so that any time you rang up anybody from the government, that person from the government would take the view that, the whole kind of raison d'etre for Isle of Man government is to create freedom to flourish. So my answer will not be, I think you've rang the wrong person here, or I'm afraid I can't help with that. You'll have to speak to so and so. Instead of the very cautious replies that sometimes you get from people when you ring them up, it would be, I can't help, but I know a person who can, and I'll make sure that I pass your contact details on, and I'll be sure that this person will give you a ring within the next, 24 hours. It was that change that was what we were looking for with the whole freedom to flourish thing. Obviously, that's died a death. It wasn't well received. The big sell that was required once the brand had been established didn't happen. I think the new chief minister of the day just didn't sort of understand what it was that was trying to be achieved, and it became a bit of a laughing stock in the end.
Yeah, and I think it was a pretty sound concept, actually, but like so many things in the Isle of Man government, what should have been a starting point was taken as the end of the process. Right, we've got some words now. All we have to do is keep saying it. And in terms of changing policies, changing culture, what have you, there was no follow through. I can remember talking to a very senior politician about what government would now do to review its policies and its approaches to things in the light of freedom to flourish, and I just got a completely blank look.
Yeah, and
we've got a label now. That's all we need to do.
And that is where perhaps maybe we're going wrong now. I mean, the government relies on the idea that we're a very slim, easy to approach government, that you come in and you can talk to the minister one day, and within a few months there's a new piece of legislation going through Tynwald and everything is sorted. That is what what government assumes that it is. But perhaps that's not something that an assumption that's shared by most people outside of government.
No, and I think people have mixed experiences. I think there are some parts of government that are very responsive and kind of receptive to ideas. But I mean, the burden of regulation overall was is a familiar complaint from business, and that was again raised. And obviously there is a focus on regulation at the moment as we run up to Moneyval. Maybe there'll be some breathing space after that to kind of apply a lighter touch in some areas. And I don't want to give the impression, by the way, that the whole tone of the Chamber event was negative, because they had a guest speaker who kind of confirmed the message that there are some really good opportunities out there around AI, digital assets and so on, the sorts of things that I have to say I don't really understand. But, but again, that all comes back to being kind of agile with the legislation, doing niche things, that other places can't do so easily.
Yes, and of course the the thing that we could potentially be good at is that agility, because the Isle of Man government does have the capability of acting swiftly on things. But maybe more than ever we need to have that cultural change, the freedom to flourish idea. I think it would have to be called something else now, but that does need to happen, because it seems that it's quite the opposite. The general approach or general view taken by the civil service, by politicians, seems to be, well, let's set up a committee. Let's think about this. Let's consider. Let's pass this around amongst ourselves for several years before we give you a decision. That seems more the response that people expect from Isle of Man government.
And it's risk aversion built up over the years, and it's getting the balance right, I suppose, between that kind of creating the right environment for entrepreneurs and new ideas, at the same time protecting our reputation as being regulatory sound.
And of course, the great example of what goes wrong, or what can go wrong if you are freer in terms of your approach and more welcoming and all-encompassing, is the whole King gaming situation, which has clearly led to significant embarrassment in the Isle of Man.
Yeah, I mean, a reputational disaster. There seemed to have been a complete failure of due diligence in certain quarters of government, again, because they were so hungry to hit the targets. I mean, it's an old story, where you just get so focused on one area of government that perhaps doesn't have the same awareness of kind of governance issues, just goes all out for the big prize, and people take advantage of that.
And then well, naturally, people become much more risk averse, much less eager to engage and say yes, because it just seems like a really good idea, and yes, we just need to get on with this and make it happen. That becomes less likely to happen because of that concern that your name could be splashed over the front pages of whatever the latest news story is, and not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So economic growth doesn't necessarily mean more people. So how do we grow the economy without growing the population then?
Well, I think especially in the age of AI, I guess you create the value in the actual businesses, and that raises a challenge, because most of our taxation comes from employees. If there's going to be fewer employees, but you've got companies making a lot of money, we might have to think about our taxation model. But generally, I think you always need new people with new ideas to come in. Those entrepreneurial individuals. And that's the fresh thinking. I mean, that's always welcome. So you will always need those people. What you don't need, especially in an age of AI, which will be shredding a lot of conventional jobs, is just a lot of people just to get the numbers up, who will then become will be calling on the welfare state. So I guess you need to be selective about who you're letting in.
How were we so successful back in the 90s then? Because at that time it did genuinely feel as though if you went to see a minister, you would get a decision within a week, and things would start moving. Was it just luck that there weren't some big disasters that came along, or was there something else to this? Because even now, any decision that is backed by lots and lots of paperwork, so that every likely problem has been conceived of, and even with all that, we still seem to get some of the decisions
well, that's
wrong.
it. That's human nature. I mean, I believe in government decisions being properly considered and based on sound evidence and so on. But again, it's getting the balance right and not kind of hiding behind that. I guess maybe there are cycles in these things. I mean, some of us were old enough to remember the early 80s, which was a period of significant difficulty for the island, and kind of out of that grew the ministerial system, because I think the feeling was that we've got such big challenges, we need more cohesion and direction in our government. I mean, my view is that we're at another of those points and that we need to develop the system even further, but that's I keep banging that drum. So, and then, from the mid-80s, it really took off, partly as a result of the groundwork that they'd done in the early 80s. There were some far-sighted individuals. There was a general boom in financial services in the UK. There was some overspill from the Channel Islands, and things kind of converged and really took off. And behind that, in the 90s, you had the largesse of the VAT arrangement. So we were kind of rolling in it. We were on a roll.
Because that VAT, and we'll talk about taxation in a future programme, possibly even the next programme, but that VAT meant that actually we were, despite feeling like a low-tax economy, we were quite a high-tax economy.
And I think that was a good part of the reason for our so-called economic miracle. And I'm not sure many of us at the time realised exactly what was going on, even in the media. It's like, where's all this money coming from? Oh, well, and you're always given a very technical explanation, Don't rock the boat, boys,
Okay, well, we're almost, believe it or not, we're almost at the end of the programme. What advice would you give to either new candidates or indeed the MHKs defending their seats? What are the things that we need to do differently in the next 5 years to what we've done in the current 5 years? What do you think?
Well, I couldn't be that presumptuous as to give that kind of advice, but I do think it's important to have an honest, fully independent reconsideration of our economic strategy, and that means not just DFE, trying to justify its own performance thus far. And I'm sure it's done lots of good things, but I think to get the level of confidence, it needs to be a proper review and a recognition that our economy is now changing overall and not in a good way. So just get out of that denial phase, really.
Yes, and as a former new MHK, I would say to any MHK listening, or any prospective MHK listening, if you think that something is a really good idea, don't allow government to fob you off at the first opportunity. If you think it's a really good idea, keep pushing, keep fighting to try and get this idea properly considered and properly implemented. And of course, the great way of slowing down a new MHK with big ideas is to give them lots of things to do. Wouldn't you like, young Gorn, wouldn't you love to be the member for health? Or while you're there, you could do member for social security at the same time. And what about being the member for agriculture and fisheries? Yes, you could do that. And what about this committee? You could get on this and you could do that. And the next thing, you're so busy on committees and departments that you start to find that you haven't got time to push on your pet projects.
Yeah, and that's activity rather than action.
Yes, and there's a big danger associated with that, sadly, because reading lots and lots of documents that are thrust in front of you by well-meaning, I'm sure, civil servants means that you're not doing your own research, pushing your own pet projects.
I think people need to leave some space for themselves. And this is the downside of this kind of Team Tynwald idea where we're all working together, you do this and you do that, and people maybe lose the thinking time.
Well, we've ran out of thinking time on this week's agenda, but we'll see. We'll see what comes of the next 5 years. Let's hope that the economy picks up, whether that be through actions of the new Tynwald members or indeed good fortune in global economic circumstances. That was political commentator Alistair Ramsey. So what do you think? Are we living through a period of economic stagnation here? If so, what needs to be done to get things moving again? It would be a brave politician who told us that we need to accept fewer services, but unless a new magic money tree can be found, the next 5 years could be quite controversial. Let me know your thoughts on the programme by contacting Phil Gorn at manxradio.com and get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget this programme is available as a podcast. I'm Phil Gorn. Thanks for listening.